first, I want to thank you again for giving us the time and day for you to be interviewed by us. It's an honor, and we appreciate it.
My
I
pleasure.
think to just kind of start us off, I think what Heinen and I are trying to succeed in our mission is we're trying to get people our age, 18 to 30, to try and think about what it means to actually have an alternative. Because it's one thing, I think, to be rebellious against the oppressive system that we're all in, but what do you replace it with? And one of the things that we've really been promoting is this Kennedy speech that he gave at American University. And I believe you're familiar with it. Is that correct?
Sure.
Yeah.
One of
And
the great speeches of the century.
so it's the 60th anniversary of that speech, I think in 3 days or so. And what is it exactly? What is your characterization of that speech, its importance, and how do I get people my age to actually go to that as their vision for the future?
The speech kind of went under the radar at the time, as I remember. It wasn't particularly noted until afterward. Kennedy had a very busy last 6, 8 months of his life. This was extremely, many things were happening. It's interesting that he gave that speech almost a couple of days apart from when he gave his civil rights speech about the situation in Alabama. He gave a beautiful speech. You should familiarize yourself with that speech too, because it was one of the really first eloquent statements about civil rights. And it prefaced a lot of what Martin Luther King was going to say in his I Have a Dream speech. In fact, well, I'm sorry, it did come after his, well, no, the I Have a Dream speech came in August, correct? August 63. No, it was right before it. It was actually a few months before it. You should read that speech because it's got grandiloquence to it, and he quotes Lincoln, and it's a beautiful speech. But his peace speech is extremely, to me, layered. It's a layered speech. He mentions many themes, among them reconciliation with the Soviet Union, and that was so important. And it was, as you know, it came after his near confrontation with the end of the world in 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis. This speech said that we're on the path to get it together with the Cold War was a myth. He knew this, but I mean, it's very hard to move a country away from a Cold War situation when you're spending billions of dollars on defense. As Eisenhower himself said, it's funny that Eisenhower spent the most amount of money, at the same time left behind a situation which he said was tragic. He said this is all the functions of state are going to be poisoned and contaminated by this relationship with business and the defense industry. And he meant it, and he was right. God damn it. So, and Kennedy carried that on, and he saw the same problem, although he didn't agree with Eisenhower on many things. And I think one of the most beautiful things in the speech was he recognizes the contribution of the Soviet Union in World War II. How many people were killed in the Soviet Union fighting the Nazis, fascism? He at the time he said something like 26 million or something. But the truth is, now we know the numbers are going up, and the latest actual research numbers are something closer to 39 million, and something like 20 some million were soldiers. So it's quite a huge sacrifice they made, and that is what has played a huge role in the Russian attitude towards the West. And people, I guess, in the West don't really recognize that. They don't realize the 4 or 5 of every German soldier killed in World War II was killed on the Eastern Front, not on the Western Front. Now, that's not to say the West did not contribute. They did. Lend-Lease was very big to Russia. Lend-Lease, we were shipping them petroleum, all kinds of products, which were crucial to their effort and kept them going at a time when they were very, very deprived of everything. But you have to say the Russians did pull themselves up by the bootstrap. And Kennedy, he acknowledged the damage done to their country. He said 1/3 of that country, basically the Ukraine area, the whole western section of the country had been decimated by the Nazis. It was so he said from here to Chicago would be the equivalent, meaning in the Soviet Union. From New York, from Washington to Chicago is what he was relating to. In that speech, he also and he said it's time to realize this, and it's time for our countries to basically get it together and respect each other. And he emphasized not a Pax Americana. That was what people were thinking at the time, that it was an American peace governed by American weapons of war, which is what we have to some degree now in the world. In other words, he was counseling a real peace of understanding, of compassion, of mutual respect. And we never achieved that, believe it or not. We never achieved that. Briefly, I believe, he was killed soon thereafter, and his peace initiative with the Soviet Union went down in the toilet. Lyndon Johnson was a pedestrian politician and a stupid man because he got himself involved in a ridiculous war 6,000 miles away. He knew, he must have known better than to do that, and he kept fighting it. He never gave up because America cannot lose. It's a point of honor that Nixon kept emphasizing. We have to have a peace with honor. That peace with honor cost the Vietnamese millions of people, and it cost American lives quite a bit, and it destroyed a lot of the country in the sense of up here, our morale. We came back from that war, and I was a soldier there, much more callous about the world, we didn't consider at that time Asian people to be human beings in the same level that we were. I mean that it was a form of racism, but that existed, and it still exists. Now, of course, we've come to respect the Asian race because they made a lot of money, and they're very good at business and organization and society and these people. But at that time, it was a whole other ballgame, and that war was one of the insanities of life that you have to live through. Everyone's going to live through some kind of insanity. I'm sure you will too, or you probably have already. But anyway, Kennedy's dream was shattered, but it still exists.
Mr. Stone, I wanted to get your thoughts on a recent admission that RFK Jr. made on the Sean Hannity show when he was asked about the death of his father, excuse me. And he had said, I'll just quote it, that the day that my uncle was killed, I was picked up at Sidwell Friends School and brought home. The first phone call that my father made after J. Edgar Hoover told him that his brother had been shot was to the CIA desk officer in Langley. It was only a mile from our house, and then my father said to him, "Did your people do this?" And then he goes on to describe his father asking the same question to Henry Lewis, who was one of the Cuban Bay of Pigs leaders, and John McCone, the head of the CIA then. So I want your thoughts on his recent admission and the importance of a member of the Kennedy family saying something like this.
It is important, but I'm surprised because I knew this and we've heard it before. Robert Kennedy was clearly moving in that direction, and several people have come out and said that he was definitely going to reopen the case. Now that has been questioned, but it seems to hold up that people who knew his intention was he was going to reopen the case, and that scared a lot of people because they knew they were guilty. So that adds to the motivation to kill him. And as we know, that is one of the most screwed up assassinations of all time. It's really dumb. I mean, you have all the shots from the front, and it seems like he was shot from the rear, definitely with that second gun from the security guard called Cesar Thane, I think it was called. Robert Kennedy's been correct about this, and he knows it. And it's shocking to see his family, which should be more in the Kennedy spirit, not open up to this and condemn him like this. I think Robert's very, very, very guts. He's got the guts of his father and the guts of his uncle. And unfortunately, we don't see it in the rest of them. There is, this. Where else do you see such a ridiculous cover story as Oswald shoots him from this impossible position, and then he gets killed by a thug who's got underground connections with a mob, and that thug in turn dies of cancer very suddenly a couple of years later before he goes to trial. So Oswald is prevented from going to trial because Oswald knows a lot, because he's a plant. He's a agent provocateur, the French would say. He's an agent used by the intelligence agencies. He goes to Russia, he goes blah, blah, blah. He does all the moves. They use him like they use pawns on a piece, but he's not an important pawn. He only becomes important in hindsight, and then they got to kill him fast. But it's a ridiculous story. I mean, people who see movies would know right away that something's fishy, but the country fell asleep again. This is why people don't react. I mean, the Warren Report made people angry. The majority of people got angry, but again, nothing changed in that government. Our government is somewhat of a dictatorship in that way because it just locks in. Now we have a one-party state, basically, Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. The defense budget goes up to $1 trillion. It doesn't matter. These people keep voting and voting because the money gets channeled back in contributions to themselves. So money has got to come out of politics, clearly, but beyond that, the whole concept of a country worth defending that we believe in is very, very remote now.
Mr. Stone, this will be kind of like the last question-ish, and then I'm just going to ask one more thing of you. Donald Trump, when he was asked, why didn't you release the Kennedy files, he said, if you saw what was in them, you wouldn't want to release them too. Now, could you, this is kind of like a two-part question, I guess. Like, one, do you think he's being honest about that, or is he lying? And secondly, if he's being honest, would it expose the same kind of apparatus that is involved in the cover-up of the Nord Stream?
Well, yeah, I understand. And what'd you say, the Gulf Stream?
Of the Nord Stream, blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a whole other story too. But definitely it falls in the same area of espionage. Now, if you have evidence of espionage, like you don't keep it on paper. It has to disappear. You have to shred it. You can't have incriminating information like that running around. So I highly doubt that there would be an incriminating piece of paper. All we were doing is trying to say, let's pry this, like Jim Garrison was doing in his trial, was trying to get a little more information. Pry it open. There are CIA agents whose files we know exist, but we can't get them. Those people would be people like Phillips, people like the guy in Florida, I forgot his name. There's a lot of these guys, Morales. I'm off the top of my head, I can't remember all the names, but there are people who worked on this case, and they knew Oswald, they knew all of the players, the Cubans, they knew the mob element was working with the CIA too. But there has to be a center, and there has to be an authority at the top. That's the only thing that makes sense. The authority that controls this thing is the CIA, and to some degree the FBI, but they don't work in tandem. They were competitive. But so sometimes some of the best information comes from the FBI because they don't know what's really going on. But James Angleton in counterintelligence plays a key role here, as does Richard Helms. Helms was the chief of the CIA eventually, and a key player. I believe he knows a lot. He knew a lot more. He lied his way through Congress, John. There was a joke when he appeared in front of the committee, Frank Church, the Church Committee. That was horrible what he did. Angleton too. They all lie, but I don't know what Trump knows. He tends to be a melodramatic character, but he was the only one who actually, next to way back years ago, Garrison, he did try to do something, and then he backed off because those files were supposed to be released. There was a date, 2016, I believe it was, and somebody got to him at the very last second and put pressure and said, "You can't do this." So what he's saying, if they knew what they knew, it doesn't make sense. They wouldn't have that. They would not have that on paper, in my opinion. But there would be good information about the CIA agents and their meetings and so forth. But I don't think that's going to come out either. I like Howard Hunt too. By the way, he's a minor player, but he did say a lot of things before he died. Howard Hunt is not to be ignored. These files are important.
Just the very last question, and then we'll be wrapped up. You bringing it to now and the importance of speaking up the truth. I know you really liked what I did against the New York Times and the executive editors of Reuters and Washington Post and stuff. And we're going to continue to keep doing these things. Tynan and I are involved in training other people to do it because they recognize us now. No, yeah, we were barred from going into a congressional town hall in New York. They told us you're not allowed in. So
Are they allowed to do that?
well, I don't got the money for a lawyer. I'm sure not. But one of the things we do, though, no matter like whenever we train people, is we tell them to speak the truth unapologetically. And I think you're an expert in that. And another expert in that is Seymour Hersh. Seymour Hersh is just saying what he knows, talking and reporting what he knows. And I think he's almost 80 years old or over 80 years old now. So he's doing his thing. He's just saying, you know what, I'm just going to publish it. And he said that he took the Nord Stream story to Substack. And he said the last place he was going to take it to was the New York Times. What is your reflection and observation on that story and on Seymour Hersh in general?
Well, on Nord Stream, I do believe that the United States had to know. I mean, when Joe Biden said that so clearly in a speech before it blew up, that it's not going to go through. He almost said it point blank. He was determined to stop it. So Biden was very much aware of the situation. What exactly happened, I don't know. Maybe they used Ukrainians. I'm sure they did, but it's, the motive is so clear that, it's ridiculous the United States first cover story was the Russians who did it, which I find to be ridiculous. The Nord Stream was very important to Joe Biden, and it did sever the relationship between Russia and Europe, and that has hurt Europe more than it hurt Russia. That's what this unbelievable thing is. Germany really went along with it. That was German property as well as Russian property. They blew it up. Germany did nothing because of this. I'm saying this new chancellor, he's not really a very strong man. He seems to be cowed. In fact, he was booed the other day by his own party in Germany. I read that Scholz was booed because they're so unhappy with. He's destroyed the German economy essentially. They've allowed the Americans to take over and dictate to them that they're going to do it. Liquid natural gas is going to come from the U.S. plus other countries, and that Germany is going to abide by these higher prices. As a result, Germany, which already destroyed its nuclear plants, is now really in a hole. France is doing better with energy than Germany, and much less the coal plants that Germany. Oh, it's a nightmare. Germany has lost its standing. When you remember when we went to the Iraq War, Germany and France did not go with us. The prime minister said no. They had some sovereignty. That's pretty interesting that they at least said no to the United States on a major war that we went into. But where was I? I'm sorry. The pipeline, right? Oh yeah, on Hersh. I know Hersh, and we've had. I think he's done some very good work on My Lai. He did some very good work. I don't know if his Nord Stream story holds. I mean, I've heard pro and con. I haven't really investigated it, but Hersh, on the other hand, has done a lot of damage. And you have perhaps not know of this, but you should look at his book he wrote on Camelot. It was a very poor reporting job, and it's been outed. And he tried basically to go after the Kennedy myth, and he used. You see, when Kennedy was killed, that's when the forces that were against Kennedy all started to come out of the woodwork. The CIA among them, all these people that worked with him, gave information that was damaging to the Kennedys, such as they were behind the assassination attempts on Castro. Not so. There's no evidence of it at all. And Jim DiEugenio has been on this case for a long time. He reads everything. He was my main researcher on my JFK Revisited. Absolutely not true. Kennedy was not into assassination, did not think it would work, and knew it would backfire. But Hersh hints at all this stuff, and the sleaze with the gangsters and the women. And so Hersh is very much a Puritan in his mentality, Puritan, and he has this, I call it, vulnerable side where he sees sex as some kind of mortal wound or something. That he's a strange guy, Hersh. I would counsel you to be cautious in what he writes. He's good, but he's getting his information from CIA people, and he's admitted as such. And that CI person who he particularly got information on Camelot was the assistant to Richard Helms during all this process. I forgot his name, but he gave a lot of information on the Kennedys, against the Kennedys, to her. So that the source has to be questioned there.
Okay, perfect. I'm out of questions. I think that's it, Kynan. If there's anything else, now's the time.
No, I think this is good place to stop.
Good.
Yeah, Mr. Stone, I again want to thank you for giving us the time to do this. And just, if you could just give me like a 10-second, like, I endorse the Kennedy speech, because we really want people to watch it this weekend. And
I just want to make one comment to you. In your note to me,
yes.
I got to pee. 1 second.
Oh, okay.